I think, everybody kind of just needs a break from the doom and gloom of the world. It was just like the perfect storm of, what people needed and what people wanted at the same time. And now that more people are discovering that, they're wanting to find similar books. And, luckily there's a lot of indie authors that have rose to the challenge.
Do you love science fiction and fantasy books? You found yourself in the right dimension. Welcome to the greatest podcast in the multiverse, where each week I talk to science fiction and fantasy authors about myth, magic, and the infinite possibilities of storytelling. I'm your host, Herman Stuernagel, and I will be taking you on a journey with some of your favorite authors, helping you to get to know them and possibly uncover some new literary gems along the way. Ready to explore? Because on this show, every conversation is a doorway into a different world. Hey friends, just wanted to pop on here real quick to let you know of a couple of different things. First, be sure to check out SL Rowland's Kickstarter, which launched yesterday, July the 15th. It's really cool, hardcover special edition of Sword and Thistle. You can also pick up a special edition of Curse Cocktails if you missed his last Kickstarter campaign. We talk about that a little bit, but I just wanted to make sure to highlight that. Also, if you're a fan of SL Rowland, be sure to check out my launch party for the Bartender Between Worlds next week, July 23rd at 5:30 Pacific Standard Time. It will be on the FanFiAddict YouTube channel. I'll link that below. But it's going to be me, Steven, SL Rowland, as well as Diamanti, author of Stone and Sky, who I've had on the show a couple times, as well as Adrian Gibson, who is also an alumni of the show, and the author of Mushroom Blues and the host of the SFF Addicts podcast. Do check that out. I'll link that channel in the show notes. Be sure to tune in, and I'll remind you next week. And finally, The Bartender Between Worlds comes out a week from now. So be sure to check that out. Anywhere books are sold online, you can find links to download either the ebook or get the paperback or hardback shipped to you. I hope you'll check it out. Now, we're going to jump right into my interview with SL Rowland, and we're going to talk all about his book, Curse Cocktails, Sword and Thistle, as well as a number of other things cozy fantasy related. Thanks, and I hope you enjoy. So welcome once again to the greatest podcast in the multiverse. I'm really excited today to have a very special guest, SL Rowland. Welcome here, Stephen. How are you doing today?
Thanks, I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. I know we had a little bit of back and forth to get you on the podcast, but I'm so happy that you were able to make it work.
Yeah, I don't normally do podcasts, so stepping out of my comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I think I mentioned to you in one of my emails, I'm just about at a year now for this podcast. This was something so far out of my comfort zone. It's not even not even funny. I definitely understand um, the feeling of not wanting to to be on podcasts and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, but I thank you for making the exception to talk to me today. I'm happy to have you here.
No, happy to do it. You had a lot of my TikTok friends on here, so I figured I might as well join in.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you came out. Why don't you get us started, though, Stephen, and tell us a little bit about your writing journey. When did you begin your writing career, and what's brought you to this point?
So I guess I wasn't much of a writer growing up. I think, maybe once or twice when I was in high school, I tried to write some like really bad fan fiction. And then again in college, I never took any like creative writing or anything like that. I thought I was going to be a high school English teacher. But for one of my classes, there was a creative writing element. So I did a short story. And then I wrote like a few like post-apocalyptic short stories. But after that, I didn't really write again until I was 27. And I decided, I wanted to try my hand at writing a novel. So I took a month, saved up some money, and just for that entire month, I just wrote. And that was how I wrote my first novel, which is not published, but it was that learning experience that told me that I could do it.
Right.
And then I think I was probably around 29 when I discovered indie publishing, and I discovered LitRPG, and then that's kind of when I knew, like, I wanted to give this a go again. And after writing my first LitRPG, it kind of was really well received and kind of gave me the confidence that I could keep doing this. And about a year later was when I started full time.
Wow, that's great.
Uh,
That's so cool. Yeah, it's funny. I actually when I went to university as well, I went to go as a high school English teacher as well. That's what I started out with, and a couple of years into the program, I decided that wasn't what I wanted to do after all. So I ended up getting a Bachelor of Arts degree in English, which was absolutely useless. But I mean, my university gave me some other experiences that set me on your way, or on my way. Sorry. But I do want to ask, like, so you decided to write that first novel. What was the decision? I mean, you hadn't written a lot before that. What made you decide to write that first book?
I mean, I'd always like the idea of being a writer. Like, I'd always love reading, and I always like after writing those short stories, I was like, I enjoy writing, but I didn't think that they were very good. I didn't know indie publishing existed at all when
Right.
that happened. So like I wrote that first novel, and I submitted it to a lot of agents, and got rejected a lot. It was always something I wanted to do, and to kind of just see if I could do it.
Yeah, that's great. So you got that first novel out, and even though it wasn't published, I mean, you obviously continued writing since then, and now you do have quite a number of books published. So, what's your motivation for continuing to write, and what's your reason behind storytelling?
I mean, I love telling stories, and I think after I went full time as an author, um, I kind of realized that I never wanted to do anything else. I mean, I spent 10 years waiting tables because I taught for a semester, and then I was like, I don't want to do this. Like I enjoy much more like the knowledge aspect of teaching, not really like having to discipline. Uh, so I was just like, I would rather wait tables and find out what it is that I really want to do than like do something I'm not passionate about.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I totally get that. That was, similar to my motivation, behind not being a teacher either. I really enjoyed the English, like the literature part of it, and like my minor was in history, and I enjoyed learning. But standing in front of a classroom of kids all day or students all day, I realized very quickly
Yeah,
wasn't what I wanted to
yeah,
do.
not for everyone.
No, for sure. And I mean, I have friends. I still have friends who are teachers. And I mean, Daniel Kubal, he runs the Sci-Fi and Fantasy Fanatics podcast as well. I'm good friends with him, and he's a teacher. And I mean, I have other friends that are teachers too, and I totally respect what they do. But I totally get
Oh
it's not
yeah,
for
I
everyone.
have a lot of respect for it. It takes a very special person to be able to do that.
Yeah,
And I mean, I think my teachers were like a huge influence on me, like wanting to become a teacher, and my enjoyment of reading and English. But yeah, definitely not for me.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a good segue though into people who have influenced you. How about authors? What authors have inspired you and influenced your work?
So I think I was actually talking about this the other day. Like the series that got me into epic fantasy, was Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. I read those in ninth grade because my neighbor at the time, is a very old man. He kind of had like a Gandalf look about him,
Nice.
and he introduced me to those. And from there, I think I got into Harry Potter, and pretty much I've been reading fantasy ever since.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, so you mentioned your first book that you published was LitRPG. Was that first book Sentence to Troll, or is there another book that was your first
It was
one?
Pangea Online.
Pangea Online was your first one. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm not super. I know I hear the term lit RPG all the time. I haven't actually read much, if any, lit RPG. Can you just tell myself and our listeners what lit RPG is and a little bit about how it works?
For sure. So LitRPG stands for literary role playing game, and it's basically, if you took like a fantasy novel, your traditional epic fantasy novel, and you broke it down into like D&D mechanics. So when someone gets a magical sword, that sword has stats. Maybe it has abilities. When your mage is casting spells, they have stats that go along with that. They have cooldowns on their magic. Everything that you would have to take account in a video game or a D&D campaign is now interwoven with the novel.
Okay.
But it's done in a way that the system is a part of the novel, and like the people who are really passionate about reading that, they love the system just as much as they love the story. They
Right.
like being able to quantify that progression. So like LitRPG, it's a subgenre of progression fantasy. So like instead of just saying, seeing the character grow stronger over time, you're able to kind of see behind the scenes
Okay.
as to how they're growing stronger.
Right. Okay. And so and how does that translate, I guess, to the page? How does the reader, I guess, determine what level certain things are at, and is it just a matter of how you explain it, or how does that work?
So totally depends on how the author does it. So like for mine, when the character unlocks a new ability, you get kind of like a status alert that comes up. It explains the ability, its limitations. Sometimes there'll be a little description of it. As like when you're telling it in first person, you're able to like read it as the character is reading it.
Okay.
So it fits in pretty seamlessly that way. Um, some authors are less stat heavy, so they'll just have like skills or the names of the skills, and you'll understand how they work, but you won't have actual numbers attached to it. They call that more of like game lit, where lit RPG is more stat heavy. So there's quite a few different ways that you can do it.
Yeah. Okay. And so, what made you decide to pursue that genre as your your first dive into publishing?
So like right around the time that I was like looking into indie publishing, and I was, figuring out what genre I wanted to write in, lit RPG was kind of just starting to gain some traction. Um, the biggest, I guess, like mainstream title that was around at the time was Ready Player One.
Okay.
Uh, that one's kind of lighter on the game mechanics than a lot of like lit RPG are now. But I read that. I read Ascend Online and Awaken Online were two pretty big ones at the time. Virtual reality lit RPG was the most popular. The genre has kind of morphed a lot now to where they're more like system apocalypse stories, where like an alien force comes to the world, and like their technology puts these game like mechanics into your everyday life. Or
Okay.
portal fantasy, where like you go to a world where those game mechanics are just ingrained in your everyday life. Um, but those were more rare when I first started out. So I went with the virtual reality kind of, it's a post apocalyptic future, and everyone interacts through this virtual world because they can't leave their homes because everything outside is kind of very dystopian.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So yeah. So I mean, that's I guess a good intro into your series. You have two lit RPG series. Is that
Yeah, I have two lit RPG series. I actually
okay?
just finished the sixth book in my Sentence to Troll series. So they'll both be completed by this August.
Awesome. Cool. And can you give us just, I guess, a brief overview of each of the two series?
Yes, so Pangea Online, definitely, it has kind of a Ready Player One vibe to it. There's this big virtual interface full of hundreds of game worlds, and the main character, his name's Thistle. He's a data miner, which he's an orphan, and that's like one of the jobs that you can do in the game, where they go into this mine with a pickaxe, and every time they slam it down, these little green ones and zeros go flying past them. And while he's doing that, he discovers what's called a developer's chest, which is a kind of a rare hidden item that the developers like put all throughout the game world. And if you find one, there's usually a lot of goodies inside of it.
Okay.
And inside he finds a world pass, which in Pangea Online, there are some worlds that you can go to for free. Some of them you have to pay to be able to go to. But when you have the world pass that he has, he can suddenly go to any game world that he wants. And once he unlocks that, he's able to enter this tournament that has a big payout that will help him with his best friend's mother is sick. It's they live in the slums, and there's a lot of radiation there. So oftentimes, people get sick, and he's hoping to use that prize money to get her the treatment that he wants.
Nice. Cool. Yeah, that sounds really interesting, and a series I definitely need to pick up. And then Sentence to Troll is your other LitRPG series.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird premise of like an online troll. There's a new form of virtual rehabilitation, and he's it's a little bit of a dystopian future as well, but he is the first person sentenced with this new law that cracks down on cyberbullying. He's in this nationally televised stream, and his team starts losing. He goes off on his tirade and says a lot of things that he shouldn't have, and his punishment for that is he has to go into this rehab program where he is going to be playing a troll. It's a fully immersive world. So you get into this pod, it has nanites that go into your body, so you experience the world like you're really there. And he'll be a troll, which is one of the most despised races. So it's basically he gets to feel what it's like to be on the other side of that.
Right.
And the story is kind of his redemption and him finding a sense of purpose and coming to terms with what his behavior was and how it has affected everyone.
Cool. Yeah, I think Sentence to Troll was the first novel of yours that I heard of, but a little bit more recently, you kind of shifted genres a little bit into cozy fantasy, and I feel like, at least online, it seems like your cozy fantasy novels seem to have taken a little bit more prevalence in at least the reviews and that I've seen on TikTok and that sort of thing. So Cursed Cocktails and your more recent one is Sword and Thistle. Can you tell us a little bit about, I guess, those two novels and what made you decide to shift from LitRPG into cozy fantasy?
So I love cozy fantasy. I first discovered it with Travis Baldry's Legends and Lattes, and that was a huge influence on me wanting to write my own and kind of the premise that I went down with Cursed Cocktails. And so the premise of Cursed Cocktails is that a blood mage blood mages are very rare in this world, and they have they're one of the few classes that are able to hold back these dangerous monsters called behemoths in the frozen north, because they have impenetrable hides, and once they make it down into the realm, they can kind of wreak havoc, and nothing can stop them. but the blood mages are able to bypass that armor and kind of stop them before they get down into the rest of the realm. And so after 20 years of using his blood magic to defend the realm, he's finally able to retire. But using blood magic that much has kind of left his body kind of a bit broken.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's hoping that by moving to a warmer climate, he can find some relief from that. And once he moves down there, he ends up opening a tavern. And the rest of the novel is his story of, opening a tavern and, finding his new place in a world that's not, defined by violence.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you talked a little bit about Legends and Lattes there, but I guess what was some of your other inspirations in creating this story?
So once I read Legends and Lattes, like I wanted to find a lot more cozy fantasy. I read Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking,
Mm-hmm.
Can't Spell Treason Without Tea. Uh, I really like the idea of the adventurer or powerful hero who, you know, those days are behind them and they want to kind of settle down to a more slow paced life. And so I think there's something to me that's very intriguing about having all that power and then choosing to do something more mundane with it, something that makes you happy instead of, you know, going out into the world and fighting against all these dangerous things. Uh, it's kind of like I like the other stuff too, but it's nice to just like slow down for a while and kind of experience the softer aspects of these more epic worlds.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's kind of nice to kind of take a break as well from some of the high impact and
Oh yeah,
high
definitely.
stakes worlds, right?
Yeah.
Did you Were there any challenges for you in shifting from lit RPG into writing more cozy stories?
Oh, not too much. I found that they kind of come pretty naturally to me. I mean, a lot of my, especially in Sinister Troll, like I have the epic fights, the monsters and everything. But in between those, there are a lot of down moments. There are a lot of times spent in taverns and just kind of hanging out and exploring the world.
Yeah,
So
right.
basically, I just took out the more intense moments and focused on what it would be like to just live in this world where kind of D&D style world where there's magic everywhere and how would it be to just be a normal person in that world. I thought that was pretty fun.
Yeah, cool. And was there anything specific, I guess, that influenced you in kind of creating this tavern story?
So when I first had the idea for it, like I'd read Legends and Lattes, and like while I was reading that, like the idea for Rowland and being a blood mage and opening a tavern, like it was kind of percolating in the back of my mind.
Hmm.
But I was in the middle of writing Sinister Troll 5, which ended up being like a 120,000 word novel. So it took me 3 or 4 months to finish the rest of that. And the whole time that I was doing that, I was making notes and like building out this world in the background. Um, so when the time came to actually start writing, I kind of, I'd spent so much time with these characters that it really just kind of came out pretty effortlessly.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, and was that process different, I guess, than how you normally put together one of your novels?
Well, I've never really had a novel kind of sit in the background of my mind for that long.
Okay.
Normally, it's like I finished a project and then I jump into the next thing.
Hmm.
Because with my lit RPG, they were both series, so you're still telling the same story. You're not starting anything from scratch.
Right.
So it was. I think it gave it a lot more time to marinate, and like one of the compliments that I get from the cozy community is the world building and how deep it is compared to some of the others. So I think like by for one, like lit RPG is a lot of world building. So like that kind of gave me, I guess, a leg up in, really expanding on this world and like showing its depth. Um, and
Yeah.
I enjoy putting in like those little nuggets that may not mean much to the story that's happening, but it makes it deeper by like giving it a fuller background.
Yeah, right. And and that's I mean, that raises a good question too about your world building, because obviously, like you said, you've had this background in world building through your lit RPG. Bringing that into cozy fantasy, how do you keep track of everything that you're putting into the world? Because I mean, you're not only building the world for the story, you've expanded it into you expanded it into your second book as well. And then I don't know if I'm assuming that the third book in the series is going to be in the same world. How do you keep
Yes.
track of it? How do you keep track of it all?
So I use a program called Scrivener,
Okay.
and it allows you to keep a lot of folders. Uh, you have the manuscript, and then you can have folders for like characters, for world building, for pretty much anything you want. So I just have a lot of notes, notes on the world at large, notes on the characters, on the gods, the mythical creatures, monsters, everything that I come up with. It goes into this file, and like all of the stories are in the same document, so I
Okay.
can go back and forth through them and like search out keywords as I need. So
Nice.
everything I need is, if I create something, I add it to the world building file, and it's always there for the next book. And I love kind of connecting little threads between the various stories because they're all standalone, but they're set in the same world with some
Yeah.
crossover between the characters.
Yeah. Right. That's really interesting. Cause I mean, I use Scrivener as well. So you're saying that you have one Scrivener document that you're using for every story in this world?
Yes. So
Okay.
like for my Sinister Troll, like I have books 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all in the same document, and then
Really?
below
Okay.
that I have all the world building.
Oh,
And
that's
for
interesting.
my Tales of Adrian stuff, like each time I just make a new folder for the manuscript, and then all the world building is still down there.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I didn't know. So when you and this is, I mean, I'm getting into the nerdy details that half our listeners probably don't care about. But when you export then from Scrivener, you're able to export each folder. Then is that how that works?
Yeah, I think like you can pull it up, and uh, there's like little check down boxes. So you pick
Okay.
the folder that you want, and then you
Oh,
deselect the ones that you don't want. Might take a little
okay.
trial and error, but it's definitely it's pretty easy
Yeah.
once you got it going.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I have not been using Scrivener to its full potential then,
Well,
because I break out each
I'm not
folder.
either. There's so much you can do with it,
Yeah.
but as far as like file management, it's amazing.
That's cool. Yeah. Like my primary reason for using Scrivener has just been breaking out my chapters, so that, because if when I first started writing, I was just using Google Docs. And then, you get to chapter, 25 and you want to change something in chapter 6, and then you've got to scroll all the way back and try to
Yeah,
figure out where it was. So Scrivener to me was helpful just for being able to jump back and forth between chapters really quickly. Um,
yeah,
but but yeah, I mean, that is a great use case for it, having multiple books in the same series or same world that you're able to then jump back and forth between manuscripts. That's great.
yeah. So helpful.
That's awesome. Okay, cool. Um, so I guess, was there anything that was challenging for you in creating the world for Cursed Cocktails then?
Uh, yes, I think coming from lit RPG, which is more action, which is kind of at times can be more grimdark. With when I created this epic world, and especially in my first couple of drafts, there were like some things that like snuck into there that I put in for like background flavoring, that took people out of the cozy experience a little bit.
Okay.
And so like when I got that feedback, I was like, okay, so I needed to soften some of these edges, uh, because if you're in the scene like expecting something cozy, and then there's a line or two that take you out of that and make you wonder like if the characters should be looking over their shoulder, that kind of takes away the cozy feeling that you're going for.
Right.
Um, because so for example, the main character Rowland, he is a umbral elf. They're kind of like dark elves. And then there's also the elder elves. So there's a long history of the world, and basically the two sides are very different. And the umbral elves don't really come down to the more southern parts of the world. Uh, so like some of my word choices when I was first like describing him, like coming to the city, it was giving off that vibe that like he didn't belong there.
Mm-hmm.
Which wasn't necessarily the case. It was just that, it was an uncommon sight to see him there.
Right.
Uh, and so, by going back through and kind of reworking that and just like being more conscious of, word choices, details, you can really change the way a scene or a chapter is interpreted just by very small, like, details.
Yeah, it makes sense. That makes sense. Did you, I'll shift a little bit to sort of Thistle, just because I want to ask, did you have a more difficult time with that than with Curse Cocktails? And I'm just asking because Curse Cocktails, is kind of, he's setting up this, this tavern, but Sword and Thistle feels more like a quest. And, like I really enjoyed, and I'll ask you a little bit for your inspiration in creating it as well. Like to me, I was like, this seems like the best side quest that these characters could be going on.
Yeah.
But it is a little bit more of an adventure. Like, did you have that same sort of struggle with that book as well?
So it was challenging in a different way.
Okay.
I wanted to kind of push the envelope of what cozy fantasy could be with that one, and I wanted to do a cozy adventure.
Hmm.
So the premise of that one is there's the seasoned adventurer, and he's taking a quest to go find this legendary mushroom for the Eastbourne dinner cult, who it's all these rich nobles that they have this club, where they meet up and they will try these rare and like mythical foods or beasts or whatever. And usually once a year he'll go on a quest for them and track something down. So he's like tracked down slimes for them or like fairy wings, different things. And this time they wanted to find this mushroom that no one really knows if it exists or not, but it's kind of rumored that it only grows in areas that have been touched by dragon flame. So there's these ruins of a city, used to be a bustling dwarven city, and it basically got razed to the ground by a dragon. So if the mushrooms are going to be anywhere, they're also haunted, so that's why nobody goes there. So, but if they're going to be anywhere, that's where they're going to be. The challenge was making it exciting, making it an adventure, but also keeping it cozy.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
wanted
So
to kind of channel a little bit of like The Hobbit, which
right.
is there's some action. There's a lot of action and adventure in that, but I think it's still kind of cozy at its roots.
Mm-hmm.
And another story that I had read right before that was Kings of the Wild,
Okay.
which is like a bunch of older adventurers who had been, a very popular adventuring group back in the day, and they're gearing up for like one last quest together. Um, and I like the idea of kind of this older adventurer who's, he's really put in the time and made a name for himself. And so now he gets to do these kind of more cushy quests because he's so well respected.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
and this one, so another challenge was that he he made an appearance in Curse Cocktails for like half of a chapter. And when I did that, I had no idea the second book was going to be following him. So basically, I had to take everything that I had said about him in that little snippet of a chapter and kind of build it out into this full character that, I had to analyze, like, why did I choose for him to say this line in Curse Cocktails? Why did he behave this way? And how is that indicative of his personality that now I have to tell an entire novel about?
Yeah, that's great. Yes, you basically had to backwards engineer your own character from
pretty much
a cameo role.
Yeah,
that's cool. So how did I guess going back to your first point of the challenge, how did you manage to balance that aspect of cozy with adventure for the story?
If there was ever a way to tone the violence down, to have him figure something out without, violence being his first choice of action, then I wanted to do that. I gave him a backstory of where the reason he worked alone was because, 7 years prior, he was on a quest with one of his best friends and they died during that quest. So he's been dealing with that grief and he never wants to be put in a position where he has to worry about someone else on a quest again. And over the course of this novel, I wanted to challenge him to put himself out there again and to realize that, working alone might, prevent others from getting hurt, but it's not doing anything to help him in the long run.
Yeah, right.
And so this is kind of his journey of not only just completing this quest, but opening up a part of himself again.
Yeah, so really, I mean, there's definitely a level of kind of emotional growth for him in addition to it's not just about the journey, it's about his own, internal journey as well, right?
Yeah, I think that's an important part of cozy fantasy. And I mean, I guess fantasy in general is like the character's internal journey. Yeah. But it's more, how does he become a better person over the course of this? And, what does he learn in the process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I definitely think that comes through in the story. I really, really did enjoy. I really did enjoy this book. I just finished listening to the audiobook, and yeah, I had a great time with it for sure.
Oh yeah, Eric, he is an amazing narrator. He's done 2 series for me now, so
cool. Yeah, no, he did a great job for sure. I'll lead into from there. Because speaking of Sword and Thistle, I know it's not quite here yet, but by the time I put the episode up, you're going to have a Kickstarter probably running by that point.
July 15th.
July 15th, yeah, because I think I've got this slotted in for July 16th, so it should be up. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're planning for the Kickstarter for this book, and let listeners know if they do want to check that out?
So it'll be a special edition hardcover. It will come with a new dust jacket with some awesome art. It gets the vellum inserts of character art. All kinds of goodies come along with it. Last year, I did my first Kickstarter for Cursed Cocktails, and I focused it on the audiobook when I launched it, but I also had the paperbacks, the hardcovers, and like for my stretch goals, I made it to where the hardcover would get all of the special treatments. So once we hit a certain amount, it would get a dust jacket. A certain amount, it would get vellum inserts, character art, a new map, etc. And over the course of the campaign, I found that people were more excited about the hardcover than the audiobook.
Yeah.
And so I kind of retooled everything on the fly to just focus on making, the most awesome hardcover that I could.
Right.
And so then for this one, I just said straight out the gate, this one's all about the hardcover. It's going to be the exact same as the Cursed Cocktails hardcover, so it's going to have the same cover artist. Nice. It's going to have, same vellum inserts, same foil bookmark, and then all these additional little goody stickers, character art, things like that. Um, so it should
Yeah,
be. I've got some of the art in already, and I think it's going to be great.
that's awesome. That's exciting. And yeah, it's interesting to me how Kickstarter is such a different platform for readers and that sort of thing. They want the physical product. The audiobook
Yes.
isn't really that draw that big of a draw for them, because I had an audiobook stretched here for my own Kickstarter, and I was expecting a lot of people would be excited about it, and it didn't. People were like, "Yeah, that's cool." there wasn't
Yeah.
there wasn't much excitement around it. So that's awesome, and I love how you're matching it to the first book as well. Will there be an opportunity for people to grab the special edition of Cursed Cocktails if they didn't get that one? Or
Yeah. So there will be an opportunity to like purchase that as an add-on, and then there's also a tier where you can just get both of them together for a little bit of a discount.
yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing that and seeing how all the art looks for it. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm super excited.
Awesome. Cool. So, I just want to take a quick step back because I've had a few cozy fantasy authors on, and I've asked each of them this question. And I get a slightly different answer from each, so I just want to see what your take on it is. Why do you think cozy fantasy is having its day right now? What do you think the draw is to readers?
I think everybody kind of just needs a break from the doom and gloom of the world. I was actually listening to another podcast today that was like comparing cozy fantasy and grimdark and like why each came about and like what it was a response to. And I think right around, I mean, cozy fantasy has existed in a form for a long time, but I
Yeah.
think like kind of with Legends and Lattes, people started calling it cozy fantasy.
Yeah.
People started to try to make it to a genre, find other books that were similar to it, and put them all on their little, I don't know, little bookshelf together. Um, and I think when the pandemic happened and like everyone was forced inside, a lot of the things that they love to do, people that they wanted to hang out with, that was suddenly off limits. And so then when a book comes out at like the perfect time of like people wishing that they could get back into a coffee shop, just be around people, and then you get to do that in a fantasy world. It was just like the perfect storm of what people needed and what people wanted at the same time. And now that more people are discovering that, they're wanting to find similar books. And luckily there's a lot of indie authors that have rose to the challenge.
Yeah, I think, even though, the lockdowns are kind of, the lockdowns are done and that sort of thing, we're kind of past the, what kind of, I think, was the impetus for it for Travis Baldree to write Legends and Lattes. The kind of the doom and gloom of the news cycle has definitely not left that era. And, I feel, definitely the same people are looking for that break from some of the heaviness.
Oh, for sure. And like when you're reading a grimdark series, that it can weigh on you after a while. So sometimes you need a little palate cleanser in
Yeah.
between. And a cozy fantasy that's like 60 to 80,000 words is like a perfect way to just fit in between your heavier reads.
Yeah, definitely. Just a nice break and a nice breath of fresh air between, some of those bigger, darker fantasy books, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Did you find some of that as well? In your writing, like you've written it's like 11 lit RPGs now. Um, is that right?
10 and then the two cozy fantasies. So
Okay,
12,
so
12
yeah,
books
so
total.
I was
But
close.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I mean, did you find that some of that for yourself as well, like needing that break from some of the the heavier, darker lit RPG?
I think the kind of the whole reason that I started writing Cursed Cocktails was I needed a break from the Sinister Troll series. Uh, when I started writing that in 2018, and then I think I was midway. Well, no, I had just finished Sinister Troll 4, and like it was like the day that the audiobook released. Like I found out that like some of my family members were going to prison, and then I was like, I don't really want to write about this fictional prison sentence
Yeah.
anymore.
Wow.
And like I forced myself to write book 5, and by the time that was over, I was like, I need something else. And I'd read Legends of Lantes, and I was like, this is how I'm just gonna recenter myself and
Wow.
find a passion for writing again. And it worked. And then so I wrote 2 cozy fantasies, and by that point, somewhere along the way, I've found the ending for Sinister Troll that I didn't really. I knew it was going to end at some point. I didn't know how many books it would take to get there, if it would be
Right.
6 or 8 or 10. But I'd always been working towards an end goal, and I just kind of the ending clicked into place, and I was like, this is the perfect spot for it. So I wrote that, and then now I'm happy to get back into the cozy world again.
Yeah, right. So again, a great segue there. Can you tell us a little bit about what readers can expect from you next?
So I'll be working on the third Tales of Adria novel. So they're all standalones, but there is some overlap. You might see like a minor character in one becomes a main character in the other, or several minor characters just popping through the various stories. But this one's called The Halfling's Harvest. It's about a halfling woman, and she runs a inn and a vineyard together in this little halfling town. And the story takes place right before the annual harvest festival, which marks like the end of the farming season. So everybody is kind of celebrating that, and getting ready to kind of hunker down for the winter. Um, and so with the harvest festival, there's all these like baking contests, dances, celebrations, outdoors events, and there's a wine tasting where the main character, her father, he ran the vineyard and the inn before her, and during his heyday, he won the wine contest many times. He was known for his wine, and she's competed a lot. She's always gotten second place,
Hmm.
and she's hoping to like finally step out from her father's shadow, and kind of make her own name in this world.
Cool, cool. That sounds really nice and really cozy.
Yeah, it should be a fun time. I've got it plotted. I haven't started writing yet.
Okay, nice. But that is coming in. You've got it planned for the upcoming year.
I've got it. So right now, I've got it up on pre-order for March of 2025. I expect to move that up, maybe as early as this fall. I just wanted to give myself plenty of leeway to not feel rushed, and
Yeah,
we're trying to get a special narrator from this one, since it's a female point of view,
yeah.
and still waiting to hear back from her on that.
Very cool. It's something to look forward to. So, do you think that you will continue with LitRPG as well, or are you focused more on the cozy for the near term?
I think I'll always do lit RPG in some sense, but I think it will be interspersed between more traditional fantasy, because I like both.
Hmm.
Uh, but it's nice to not have to worry about the stats and keeping track of all that, and just tell the story from time to time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Very cool. So, Stephen, this is the greatest podcast in the multiverse. So, can you tell me how, in a parallel universe, a different decision might have affected another version of your life?
Oh, I could tell you several. I mean, I think if I had chosen to stay with teaching, I think I would have a very different life. Uh, I don't know. I mean, I love the life that I have. I'm very glad that I decided that wasn't for me.
Mhm.
Working from home, making my own schedule. That's kind of the dream come true to just sit down and tell stories, and that people actually want to read them and
Yeah.
are grateful for them is pretty awesome.
Yeah, really cool. Very cool, Stephen. Can you tell our listeners where they can best find you and how they can get copies of your books?
Yeah, so my website is slrowland.com. I have all my links there. All my books that are up for pre-order are over there. I'm also on TikTok at slrowlandauthor. I sell a lot of signed copies through there. Um, and then pretty much on Facebook, Instagram, wherever, it's slrowlandauthor.
Awesome. Very cool. I'll be sure to link all of those in the show notes, as well as links to your Kickstarter and pre-order for your Halflings Harvest. And yeah, looking forward to seeing both of those and how they turn out.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks again for coming on the show this week, and I look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Yeah, for sure. It was a great time.
Thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed the show, like and subscribe on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Greatest Podcast in the Multiverse. As well, you can help support the show by supporting me on Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, you can get early access to the show, as well as submit your questions for my upcoming guests. I hope to see you next time. Bye now.